Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled you're here. I'm Kristen Haught. I'm part of our security organization, and I am here with Eric Doctor, who actually is not part of our security organization. He is the VP of our Builder Experience organization, and we're here with you. We're so happy you're here. You might have developers within your organization who think that security is slowing them down. Well, we're here to tell you about how we at Amazon are working towards making that less of a reality, helping our builders think that we're really helping them speed up.
That's right, yes. I'm Eric. I'm the vice president of our Amazon Software Builder Experience team. We own all the tools that our builders use to build and deploy and operate all of our applications across all of Amazon. And yeah, as Kristen said, we've learned some tips and tricks about how we can be more efficient at actually building security into our applications from the start to reduce toil and get better security outcomes. So we're here today to tell you about a couple things. First, before I get too far into it, I figure I should introduce myself a little more. I've been at Amazon 23 years. Yes, I started in 1999. And when I started at Amazon, we sold books, we sold CDs, we sold VHS tapes, and we sold, a little far ahead here. I'll just go with it. And we sold, we were just getting into the business of selling electronics. And I joined Amazon to build and work on the team that launched Amazon Marketplace. The second thing I did, which is already up on the slide, not the second thing, but later in my Amazon career, I worked on Amazon Fire Phone. And Amazon Fire Phone was called by our CEO, Jeff Bezos at the time, one of our most amazing failures. And I actually really enjoyed this project and this program. One thing, and we really, we're proud of the technology we built. It wasn't much of a commercial success, but for instance, on the Fire Phone, I worked on the mapping technology, and today that mapping technology is still in use in the last mile and the delivery apps that Amazon delivery drivers use. Another thing that we built as part of that program that is still in use today was there was an ability for customers to get help in the Fire Phone and contact Amazon customer service. And that call routing and technology wound up becoming reused in what is now Amazon Connect, the call center in the cloud business. So after that, I moved into AWS, and I spent 6 years leading the AWS cryptography program, or the cryptography teams. No, I promise you, I'm still not a security expert. What we were doing in AWS cryptography, and what you're probably hearing about here at Inforce, is how the cryptography teams and products can help you secure your data. And so making it easy to get the data secured correctly was all of what our mission was there. And that continues to be my theme, making it easy to get the security right, and a bunch of other things as well in our developer and builder tools. Outside of work, I have 3 kids, the eldest of which is a catcher on the Wesleyan softball team. And Kristen, you too are a catcher, correct?
I was a catcher.
Yeah.
Let's make that clear. It would be a really hard thing to do for me these days. So I have not been at Amazon quite as long as Eric has. I have about 1/3 of his tenure. So I've been here for a little over 8 years. And since they tell you in speaker training to talk in threes, I'm going to introduce myself that way. So I have spent my time at Amazon in 3 different cities. I started in New York City. I then had the opportunity to move to our headquarters in Seattle, where I worked for about 6 years. And I've recently moved back to Austin, Texas, where I was born and raised. I've also worked for Amazon in 3 different organizations. I started in our security assurance organization, where I worked directly on a number of AWS's third-party audits. These are audits you likely rely on to verify our security, audits like PCI, SOC, FedRAMP. I then moved into our financial services organization, where I worked directly with AWS customers like Goldman Sachs and Fidelity Investments. It was a real privilege to learn about how they are building on AWS. You might have heard them speak on stage at some AWS events like this one. And then I've recently moved back into our security organization to lead a program that I'll be talking to you about today, in which we embed security practitioners across all of our builder teams across Amazon. And so my last thing of 3s, you might be able to tell, I am expecting a baby. My husband and I, who, of course, I met at Amazon, are expecting a little boy on October 3rd. So, enough about Eric and I. Let's talk about you. What are you going to get out of this session? First, we're going to talk about how multiple teams can and should work together to ship software in a way that delivers not only secure software, but also by path of a positive builder experience. We're then going to talk about the data and information that we use to decide what are we going to build? How are we going to improve that positive builder experience while also improve security? We're then going to talk about that undifferentiated heavy lifting that we're removing from our builders. We're going to talk to you about some tools and mechanisms that we've built to do just that. And then last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about how do we measure the success of an improved builder experience and better security outcomes. So to kick us off, Eric, would you mind telling them about this organization that you lead, Builder Experience?
Sure, absolutely. So in the Amazon Builder Experience team, my team, we're on a mission to make Amazon the best place for software builders to build. And we know we're not there yet. And I should qualify when we start. When I say a software builder, I mean everyone who works on the creation and maintenance of software applications. So of course, that's the engineers who write the code, but we also think about the QA teams, the program management teams, product management, the managers who oversee these organizations. They're all builders in our book. And over the years at Amazon, we've gotten really good in our builder teams at delivering for customers. We know how to ship, and we also know when there's a hint of an issue or when there's a concern. We've gotten really good at actually dropping everything and swarming. So we like to say if there's ever a concern about a security vulnerability that we're learning about or being raised or a potential operational issue, we drop everything and swarm it. And that's very much in our culture, and we're really good at it. But in our zeal to deliver for customers, we've gotten so good at this that we've created a lot of dropping everything and running and swarming issues. And we never really stepped back until now and asked, is there a better way to do this? Could we be more efficient? So let me tell you a little story. So December 9th, 2021. I can't really see the audience, but at show of hands, if anyone remembers that date indelibly in their head. A couple of hands I can see. For those who don't remember that date indelibly, that was the day that the Log4j 0 day hit us all, and we all had to drop everything and swarm. And I'll give you a little overview of what that looks like at Amazon, what swarming looks like at Amazon. So we paged on December 9th, we paged 18,000 engineers, different engineers to get involved for 18,000 different teams. And those 18,000, oh, by the way, those pages, given the time that the package became available, when we learned about it and when we had a fix ready for people to pick up and deploy, more than 75% of those pages hit the builder outside of their normal business hours, wherever they happen to be in the world. And then those 18,000 builders, in order to pick up and deploy this is another mind-numbing fact, took 1.5 million manual steps in our builder tools. We counted them all. And what does that mean? So that was everything from package import to kicking off builds, to kicking off deployments, and then if a deployment was paused because of a test that was giving a problematic result, the builder would have to go in and investigate and decide it wasn't relevant for this and move that on. So it's a lot of work. 1.5 million manual actions. So this is, we were already thinking that we had to step back and look back at how we are building and managing. It really came to how we at Amazon think about ownership. It's one of our leadership principles. We talk about that a bunch. And in the software builder world, when we talk about ownership, we have historically told teams, you really own your application from soup to nuts. You own the security of it. You own every line of code in it. And when we say every line of code, we mean every line of code. So that means that when the Log4j incident happened, we asked all teams to pick it up and manage it themselves. And so this is, as we step back and look at this, it's a kind of an example of undifferentiated heavy lifting. These 18,000 engineers or teams, they were all probably not logging experts. They were probably building something that was very different, and they want to focus on their core mission and their core application, and they just want this handled for them. So this was a kind of a big moment for us, and it kind of led to the founding of our team and stepping back and thinking, can we do things better for all builders across Amazon? So that's how we got started. We got started in February of this year, and we brought these teams together that owned all of these tools that we use internally. And a couple things, I want to give you a little overview of what we're working on for our builders here and how we can use these to improve security outcomes. So our first mission, unsurprisingly, given the story I just told, is we want to radically reduce the cost of managing our third-party software. There's a lot of unnecessary toil, and we think we can bring this together and provide better outcomes for our builders and our customers. The second thing we need to do is our builders do a lot of really infrastructure stand-up tasks, and I'm assuming yours do too. This is when you create a new application or you deploy an application to a new geography, you have to create your VPC groups, configure your security policies, and inside of Amazon, AWS customers get to use CloudFormation. Inside of Amazon, we cannot always use AWS tools at all levels of the stack. We have to avoid circular dependencies. So that's something my team has to take on and make sure that is available to all builders. Another area of toil that we're seeking to reduce is the amount of toil related to just managing the hosts themselves. We want our builders to actually use the highest level abstraction possible for their application. Going back to December 9th, if your application ran on Lambda and API Gateway, you didn't lift a finger and you didn't get paged. So teams that run on a Lambda or containers have some of that toil taken away from them and they don't have to worry about it. And we want to make it easier for all builders at Amazon to have access to tools like that. Our fourth area of focus is around insights and showing builders how they stack up and how our applications stack up. We know at a company our size with a builder workforce as large as ours, there's going to be pockets where we're really good at following best practices and not so good. And we think that using insights and metrics and surfacing them at the right way will cause teams to really see and react and prioritize the things we want to do. So that's something we can do as a central team. Our fifth area is really we want to make managing work easier for builders. This is a much more inward-focused program. We have quite a few places to manage work within Amazon, our ticketing system, our task management system, the place we track all sorts of action items. And it winds up being that no builder team can see in all these places all at once, and we're going to try to help them see all of that. And the last area of our team is we really feel like Amazon at our size, we have the opportunity to have our builders learn from each other and build education programs. We have some of people working on machine learning, people working on robotics, people working on cryptography, my old team. And we want to create those opportunities where people can learn from each other. And so it's one of our other tenets of our team is to help people kind of really grow their career and engineers grow their career. So that's about us, but how we still need to partner with our security partners to really ship securely. You want to tell us how we do that and work together?
Sure, absolutely. So I want to start by telling you about the proactive security mission that we have within our organization. And it starts with shipping software securely, right? Security is foundational to the customer experience, but it isn't the only thing that goes into delighting our customers. And what I mean by this is that a service that has security issues, it doesn't delight you, right? But a service that isn't available, hasn't launched yet, doesn't have the opportunity to delight you. So the AWS Proactive Security Organization's mission is to enable our builder teams to be able to launch their services on schedule with the right customer experience and with an appropriately high security bar. So I want to tell you about a couple of things that are foundational to how we execute on this mission. There's no better way to sum it up than how C.J. Moses states it. And he said this during the keynote this morning. You might have caught it with Steve Schmidt and Kurt Kufield, all exceptional leaders. He says, service teams own the security of their service, and AWS Security owns the security of AWS. So this ownership model is really important to how we operate. Eric touched on the ownership model a little bit, but it determines how our builder teams do the things that they do and what they do. So keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. The other thing that I want you to understand as we go through this presentation and how we execute on this mission is the construct of Amazon teams. You might have heard about Amazon's two-pizza team structure. What this means is that 2 pizzas should be enough to feed a team. So a team is usually comprised of about 8 to 12 engineers. This small team structure enables the teams to make decisions quickly, innovate quickly. It also helps minimize these social constraints. That's kind of based off the theory of Conway's Law. If you're not familiar with Conway's Law, it essentially says that an organization's communication structure, it mirrors the way that they build technology architectures. So if you think about large interconnected teams, they typically produce these monolithic architectures. But small distributed teams, they typically produce these modular service architectures. So, as a security organization, we want our 2 pizza teams to be able to own their security in the bounds of their business and of their technology. So, to sum it up, before Eric and I go into some of the mechanisms and tools we've put together, I want to remind you that the reason why Eric and I are standing up on stage together today is because together we're collectively partnering to deliver these better customer experiences with secure outcomes for our customers. We're both working towards the same goal, right? And to understand that, especially as security practitioners in the room, we have to understand that builders, they don't exist to serve security, right? And we, as security practitioners, we understand that builders don't exist to serve security as well. We both exist to serve you, our customers, and make it easier for you to make the right security decisions. So with that, Eric, tell us about some of the mechanisms and tools that we're working on together.
Sure, yeah. So like Kristen said, this is all at the high level, great, but how do we actually do this? What are some mechanisms and best practices and some tools that we built, and what can you take away from this? We really wanted to focus on reducing toil and extra work and burden that we were putting in to get security right. So to start, I'm going to look at this software development lifecycle slide. Again, this is probably pretty familiar to everyone in the room, whether you're a builder, a software engineer, a security practitioner. This is the steps that most folks go through to build software. But as a security team, you layer in a few extra steps, right?
Yes, that's right. As a security team, I think what's most important to us is that we need to understand what our builder's experience is. And what I mean by that is not for you to come in here today, look at the screen, take this general builder lifecycle and say, okay, we're going to embed our security processes into this builder lifecycle. Yes, I want you to think about how you can incorporate them into it. But the first step is really deeply understanding how do your builders within your organization build? Where do they start? So at Amazon, how did we look at this? Well, we wanted to take our isolated security review process, this is a few years ago, and figure out how to incorporate it into this life cycle. And what's unique about Amazon is that every new service, every new feature, every new functionality that we build, it starts with what we call a working backwards doc. If you're not familiar with the working backwards doc, I'll give you just a quick overview. Essentially what it is before a service is designed, developed, any work is done on it, a doc is written and it's comprised of 2 things. 1, a press release. The press release is 1 page. It outlines what the customer experience is going to look like. It's essentially written like you're launching the service at that point in time. The second piece of it are FAQs, both internal and external FAQs. So what we did as a security organization, knowing that every single service and feature started there, we worked to incorporate the appropriate security questions into that document's template. And the result was great. Every single time a new service team or a builder team was building new services or features, they would engage us to help them answer those questions and help them think about the appropriate security considerations for their particular technology that they were building. That was great until we realized, whoa, our builder teams are growing a lot faster than our security organization. The other things that we saw come out of that is very positive. Design reviews were happening earlier, threat modeling was happening earlier, and at Amazon, our builders, they own their own threat models, so that goes back into that ownership model I was talking about. So it was great to see these things happening much earlier in that builder lifecycle, but we had some challenges that we encountered along the way. So what were those challenges? Well, our builders, they were still telling us that security was slowing them down. They felt the security review process was taking too long, and we were still delaying their launches. So, when thinking about how we were going to address this, we needed to think about a solution that would help us launch on schedule, and as I mentioned earlier, with the appropriately high security bar. The other challenge we had is the builders were still saying that it was taking too long to remediate the findings that we were identifying. And the reason why was because these findings were being identified too late in that builder life cycle. So we needed to have a solution that would help us identify risks and findings earlier on in that life cycle. One other area that the builders were telling us is that there was a lot of confusion still and inconsistencies in how we engaged with them throughout that builder lifecycle. So while we were engaging them with them early, they felt it was different after every launch, and they wanted to see more consistencies and reduce confusion and variation in that process. And then, last but certainly not least, one of our biggest problems that I alluded to earlier was there was this builder to security ratio disparity, right? So the speed of which the business wanted to innovate was really hard for us to keep up with. And one reason, I'll tell you a little fun fact, one reason it was hard for us to keep up with is it actually takes 22 times more interviews to hire a security engineer than it does a software development engineer. Isn't that baffling? It's hard to find developers, much less security engineers. So we had to figure out how to deal with this challenge while still trying to shift left, right? We're still trying to get upstream in that process. So essentially what we decided we needed to do is we needed to embed security into our builder teams. So you might be wondering, well, how the heck are you going to do this if it takes 22 times more interviews to hire a security engineer? I'm not talking about embedding security engineers and practitioners into our builder teams. I'm actually talking about developing our builders to think like security practitioners and to think and understand the peculiarities of how AWS does security and how we meet our uniquely high security bar. So we decided to do a little pilot to where we took about 100 different builder teams and we trained an engineer on that team on just that, how to do security at AWS. And we saw some really great results. We saw a reduction in the amount of time it took for security reviews to take place, and we saw a reduction in the number of findings that were coming out of those reviews. So after that pilot, we decided to double down and build a formal program around this called the AWS Guardians Program. And this is the program that I lead. So what that is, and what a guardian is somebody who is trained by AWS. They're a developer by trade. They're trained by AWS Security on how to think like a security practitioner. And they help their teams think about and consider all the security considerations throughout that builder lifecycle. And when I say throughout the builder lifecycle, I think that's the most important part. Every sprint planning meeting, every sprint demo, every design meeting, that guardian is involved in those because of where they sit in the team, and it helps them inject those security considerations earlier, not requiring direct engagement from our AppSec team. So let's talk about what it looked like once we scaled this program. And it took some time and we had some hurdles along the way. I'll tell you a bit about those as well. But we've now trained about 2,000 development engineers on how to think about security. And this number is really more like 3,000 because as people leave, we have to take into consideration how do you backfill those guardians and train those guardians. So training's really important. But the results are super impactful. One, security reviews that had, or teams that had a guardian on them, their security reviews were taking 22.5% less medium and high findings. That is a huge impact when you think at the scale of which we operate. That means that over 15,000 findings are being identified earlier on and addressed earlier on, so they're not coming up later in that process. The other really amazing data point that we see is that security reviews are benefiting from 26.9% less time to complete end to end when they have a Guardian embedded on that team. And when you look over a year period of time and the number of launches that AWS has, that results in 210,000 calendar days that we're saving, meaning we're able to get new services and functionality out to you sooner. So, if you are as compelled by this data as I was, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can take home with you this idea of building a Guardians program and some tips and tricks on how to do it. First, identify a diverse set of Guardians. And what do I mean by diverse? I mean, identify engineers within your teams who have varying levels of experience in engineering, varying levels of experience with security in your security review process, and varying amount of tenure within your organization. This is actually somewhere where we went wrong. We decided we were going to start with all of the extremely experienced principal engineers within our teams who had gone through security review processes and had already exercised that high judgment. We said, let's train them because then they can help train everyone else. Well, it actually resulted in us just not being able to train more junior level engineers unless us ending up figuring out later on in the process that we needed to figure out how to do that. So I start with that, and then also set an organizational goal, not just within your security team, but directly with your technology leadership as well. Really important that both organizations are on the same page and working towards the same goal. Secondly, you want to ramp them up with skills and mentorship needed to be able to perform these responsibilities. And you cannot have one without the other. Training is really important, right? You want foundational training, but you also want to train them on the things that are most relevant to what they do. So we train our Guardians, all of our Guardians, on threat modeling, for example. It's rudimentary to everything that they do. But Guardians on teams within our AI ML services, they have to think more about data privacy. So we also incorporate that into their training. The other thing that we do from a mentorship perspective is we've built this dashboard using QuickSight, which is an AWS service. And that dashboard is surfaced to all of our Guardians and all of our teams to show them all of the reviews that have been opened according to their service, who the Guardian is on it, who the service team owner is on it. And that allows new Guardians to be able to reach out to existing Guardians that are on brand new opened reviews to shadow. So they're getting this applicable hands-on practice while also getting connected with someone who's experienced to mentor them. The third thing is to build a community with continual knowledge sharing. This is really important because you don't just train someone and then let them go, right? You need to give them continual opportunities to learn and grow. So the way that we've done this is we've built some Slack channel automation. So when a new Guardian is onboarded to our program, and we recognize, and they're also in a permission group associated with, let's say, Amazon SageMaker, automatically adds that new Guardian to a SageMaker Guardian Slack channel to allow them to ask questions amongst other Guardians so that when edge cases and complex issues come up, they can talk about those and they can learn from each other. The fourth thing that you should do is measure, report, and I highlight up here, recognize Guardian effectiveness. This is also somewhere that we fell short. We thought, okay, if we, talk about how effective the program is and how it's reducing the amount of time it takes to launch, all of the service team leadership, they'll start recognizing Guardians and they'll start realizing, oh, we need to have more Guardians. Wrong. You actually have to surface that data to them for them to do that, and you have to surface it in real time so that they're constantly looking at it and using it to make decisions. So we've used also Amazon QuickSight to be able to surface some dashboards directly to our leadership, and we've implemented mechanisms that help that those service teams recognize the Guardians for their effectiveness. And lastly, you want to establish continuous feedback mechanisms. This is also something that we didn't do earlier on that I wish we would have done earlier. Guardians oftentimes, they wouldn't know how they're doing. They wouldn't know, was their threat model complete in scope? Were they actually verifying these findings or recalibrating these findings in a way that made the most sense based on their business and technology? They wanted feedback directly from the security engineers that were performing those security reviews. So build a continuous feedback mechanism for that feedback to be shared with the Guardians and with the service teams to drive improvements. So I'm going to hand it back now to Eric to talk about some tools that we've also built to improve the builder experience.
Sure, thanks, Kristen. Although before I go and talk about a couple tools, I have another success metric on the Guardians program. So in addition to everything Kristen pointed out, remember I said one of our team's initiatives is to make Amazon the best place to grow your career. So if you take a software engineer who's looking to grow their skills, being in the Guardians program is a chance for them to learn new things and help them grow their career. So we're really excited about this program to partner because it kind of fits in with our vision for continuous learning at Amazon and builders continuously learning. So it's a great program in many dimensions. But back to the tools and what we build and back to the software development lifecycle. When we talk about removing undifferentiated heavy lifting and shifting things left, obviously Kristen helps us with finding security issues before an application hits production. But when I look at this software development lifecycle, that's not really a complete and correct picture. It more looks like this, but then really like that manage time, if your application is successful and time goes on, the amount of time your application will be in production and the work you have to do to keep that secure goes way beyond the work that you just did to launch it. So you have to think about the whole application lifecycle as we iterate and operate and continue to improve our applications. So let's get into a couple of tools we built for that. So first, I did mention a couple times we would drop anything for any operational issue, and I mentioned we've gotten awfully good at that. But when you think about that at scale, and at our scale, it can actually create a lot of toil. And we wanted to give builders a way to actually safely and securely administer large production sets of resources while still keeping our high security bar, meeting all our compliance requirements. And we also wanted, as our builders take actions, we wanted to make sure we're able to audit and track them, what they're doing against production resources. So we built a tool, we call it Mechanic. It's an internal tool, but hang on, I can tell you how you can do this for yourself too. Again, this is one of those where we have to operate at many levels. Of course, the goal of every application is to run silently and to never have an issue, but it's just not reality. And sometimes builders need to get telemetry, do some data analytics and get information off of production resources, or really if they need to take an action and cause a change in production, we really want to make sure that's done safely and securely, and Mechanic is our answer for that. So how does Mechanic work? So Mechanic has 3 points that are really the magic of Mechanic. First of all, when the time comes that a builder needs to potentially interact with a production resource, none of our builders have permanent long-term access to production resources. We instead grant them a temporary credential, ephemeral access through Mechanic. And Mechanic can say if this person from this team should be taking this action. And if so, it can grant that action at that moment in time. So that's magic number 1. Number 2 is that all the actions that our builders need to take are not dreamed up and typed up at the command line in response to an event. We actually are planning in advance and thinking about how our builders need to interact and what that should look like. And so everything is scripted, reviewed, checked in, code reviewed. And so when the time comes that you have to execute a runbook, the builders are actually using pre-planned tools that have been approved. And then third piece of magic, as I mentioned, is that everything that is done through Mechanic is auditable. And so we can show every team, by the way, it's good feedback for the teams on Monday morning. If there had been a reason, what were all the actions, what alarms went off, what actions were taken, the team can learn from it. And our security partners can also see over the entire organization what's going on and help us make better decisions. So that's our tool. I'm sure you're curious how you can do that for yourselves, and I'm here to tell you can do it with AWS Systems Manager. So there's a lot of parallels to Systems Manager. First of all, that granting access, the very first thing you would do if you had an issue with a builder who wants to get access to a production resource and they don't have an IAM credential for it, you can use Systems Manager Session Manager and grant them an ephemeral temporary access or access to do a particular task. But at scale, that can be a challenge if you're managing lots of resources. And so you might want to take some steps to be able to operate more broadly. One tool you could use is System Manager Run command, which allows you to, as the name implies, run commands over large sets of resources. And then automation playbooks allow you to actually script those actions coming from a playbook. We have 75 playbooks from that we make available to you, and you can script and add your own as well. And if you want to go even more sophisticated and take more sophisticated actions, you can use step functions on top of all that. And then when you get really good with those tools, and perhaps your builders are realizing, okay, every time this impetus comes in, or this alert or this alarm goes off, we're running this run book and it's being successful, you actually can automate all of that in Systems Manager. Another tool we built to help our builders get security right up front and shift left, as Kristen talked about, is a tool to help us manage our third-party software and software package updates. Not all software package updates, of course, are created equal. There's the next version of this package has a new feature and it's non-breaking change. That's on one end of the spectrum, and then all the way at the other end of the spectrum is vulnerabilities, 0 days, and our builders have to know what's out there, what work is pending for them, and we also have to help them with priorities because, like I said, not every one of those is created equal. And we really want to help our builders to pick the right tool for the right job and pick the right package and the right package version at the right time. So let me tell you about a tool we built for this. We call it our software assurance service. Again, I will tell you how you can do the same thing. This is a view from our internal tool, our software assurance service, and we're looking at a particular team or organization and the total count of packages they have to work on. And again, not all these priorities are created equal, and the builders need to know what's most important. What should I do most urgently? And so we have other tools in this that integrate with our pipelines and deployment tools where the builders can see if anything is coming close to an expiration date. Like, for instance, a fix that's under embargo that has to be out by a certain time, or deadlines that we set for ourselves for software campaigns. So builders can see all that in our own tools. And then we can also use that pipeline tool in the case of an emergent issue. We can actually block a pipeline from deploying until that application picks up the next version of whatever software that is blocked in that application. So we can actually block them and say, this will be the next thing you deploy. It's a way we can control centrally as well. But perhaps the coolest thing of this tool, this is our internal package manager. This is an actual screenshot that we took. We created this for this presentation. We went in and started adding Jackson Data Bind 2.1 to our application. And it turns out, this was planned, Jackson Data Bind has a vulnerability against it. We don't want people taking this dependency anymore. And so this builder is typing in right now and is getting contextual information before they've even gotten the package committed. And it turns out, they could pick a later version 2.12 would be fine, but they're getting all this information. They have a link that they can go to and see and learn more. And so this is another example of what Kristen talking about, shifting as far left as possible, prevent the problem before it even starts. So how can you get started doing the same thing? We have a service, AWS Code Artifact. Code Artifact is a fully managed package repository for organizations. You can use this to securely store and share software packages in your organization. It integrates with all sorts of current package managers out there like Maven and Gradle for Java, NPM and Yarn for JavaScript, and pip and Twine for Python, and more coming soon. And it's fully managed, so as things come into your Code Artifact repository and more jobs are running, it will scale for you. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure. And here's the magic here. So you take Code Artifact as your package repository, glue it to your package repositories, and you use AWS Event Bridge to cause events to fire when packages are imported that you don't like or you don't want to have in your organization. And you can use that with CloudTrail to get information to the right teams at the right time and cause for your organization people to learn and find out about package dependencies that shouldn't be taken as soon as they're being created. Another tip would be to use Amazon Inspector, which is an automated vulnerability management service, and it can look and see in your applications if there are known vulnerabilities and alert you. It can also look for security policies or over-permissive security policies in your application. So these are just a couple of tools in the Builder tool suite that we make available to you. I won't go through the entire suite, but a lot of what my team does is the same thing that you need to do for your builders, and you have all of these tools in your toolbox to construct an application development environment to help meet your internal team's security and, frankly, your need to iterate quickly for your customers. So as you move through your development lifecycle, your security and app teams are working together, like Kristen's team and our teams are working closely together. And at the end of the day, we still know our security partners want to be able to monitor and keep track of how we're being successful. So Kristen, you want to talk about measuring success on all of these programs?
Yes, I do. Very important. And yes, security teams want to monitor and measure what the builder teams are doing, but it's also really important for the builder teams, because of our ownership model, to measure the impact and success of what they're doing. So let's talk about that a little bit. So I'm going to start off by telling you a quote that's like ingrained in my brain. So every time you set a success metric, right, you think about what's the mechanism I'm going to put in place to measure it. And I always think about what Eric Brandwein says. And Eric Brandwein is one of our distinguished security engineers. He spoke earlier today as well. He says, it's the goal of every security system to maximize the delivered customer value while minimizing the cost of that delivery. Really important. So those two things. One, customer value. Are we maximizing it? And who are our customers, right? So for the security organization, our customers are those internal builders as well as the external builders. And if we make it easier for builders in our organization to make the right security decisions, or better yet, if we build in security to where they don't even need to make a security decision, they're able to spend more time working on the functionality for you. So we want to measure that customer value. The second key thing is the cost of delivery, right? So are we minimizing it? And what is minimizing that cost of delivery? So this is really what we're looking for in this partnership between Eric's team and our security organization, is how are we reducing toil and making it easier for builders to get security right? And our metrics need to reflect that. So some principles. Before I am going to go through these kind of quickly because I want to talk to you about some specific metrics, but some principles to keep in mind when you're thinking about how you're going to measure success are, how are you reporting on metrics that relate to multiple teams? This is so important. So in other words, who are all the people involved in your system? Security, builders, your customers. These metrics need to make sense to all of those people, right? And the decisions that a security practitioner might be making off of these metrics are probably very different from the decisions that the builders from Eric's team are making off of these metrics. So we want to account for both in what we're measuring, right? And then when building these metrics, the simplicity of consumption of them is really key. I so often see teams build these highly complex dashboards that have so much good information, but they're really hard to interpret. And so you want to always try and make your metrics as simple as possible so that you can see, without much thought at all, what action am I going to take next? So, in addition to collecting data in some of these metrics, you also want to make sure you're incorporating feedback. Jeff Bezos often says, the thing I've noticed when anecdotes and data disagree is that there's probably something wrong with the way that you're measuring it, and that the anecdotes are probably right. So always try and incorporate feedback and anecdotes into the way you're measuring your success. So one way that Eric's team does this is they have a monthly builder survey tool. It goes out to a sample of builders across various organizations every single month, and it collects feedback from them. How are their tools doing? Are they making their lives easier? And then from a Guardian's perspective, I briefly mentioned this earlier, but we've incorporated a survey into our security review process, directly into that tooling that both the builders, the Guardians, and our security engineers are using. And they're asking them questions throughout that process that give those Guardians feedback on what they're doing well and where they can improve. And we incorporate that feedback directly in that security review tooling so that they're getting that information where it is most relevant to them. So let me show you some of the dashboards that the Guardians program has. So on the left here are our velocity dashboards. So I mentioned earlier, our mission is to help our service teams launch on schedule, right? They want to reduce the amount of time it takes for a security review. So these velocity dashboards give them information about how long are their security reviews taking, how long are each phase of the security reviews taking, what Guardians are associated with that security review, what teams are associated with that security review. They roll up under the same leadership to accumulate that information and to help identify trends. All of those things are really important, and we service those directly to our Guardians and our builder teams. The second dashboard up here is a findings dashboard. This shows them two things: the volume of findings and the type of findings that are being identified as part of security reviews. These are both really important because they're wanting to reduce the number of findings that are being identified, but they also want to know what are the most common types of findings that are being identified in these reviews. And we've seen this lead to really great outcomes. Our Guardians have started training their teams on the findings that keep reoccurring within their teams, and using these dashboards to measure the impact of that training and to show how their inputs are really driving change within their teams. And we use it from a Guardians program perspective to identify trends that exist across the entire company, because that helps inform what should we build? Should we automate the way out of some of these findings and prioritize that automation based on these trends? Or do we need to provide AWS-wide training to help address that as well? This information is really important to both us as well as our builders. And last up here is our recognition dashboard. So I highlighted this earlier and I'm going to highlight it again. It is so important that you recognize these builders and the Guardians for what they're doing and the impact that they're having. We've even incorporated the data that we're surfacing here we're working to incorporate it into our leveling guidelines. So as engineers are being promoted, it's recognized as part of that process, the impact that they're having here. This also drives some fun competition also amongst our Guardians, because they get to see what they're contributing to, what their peers are contributing to, how their teams are doing versus how other teams are doing. There's nothing wrong with a little healthy competition. So with that, I want to hand it back over to Eric so he can share some of the metrics that his team measures.
Absolutely, yeah. Mentioned earlier that actually one of our core areas of our team is finding those metrics and surfacing them to help drive the best practices across the organization. And we really like this quote where people respect what you inspect. So as a central team, if we start inspecting and providing a set of metrics on things, it will show what our priorities are. And I have one little example of how we drive outcomes here. So when we started this mission of trying to find and reduce builder toil, we knew that maintaining all of our packages was one of the big areas. And so we wanted to go and see if there were best practices. And there's kind of two schools of thought around here, where one is, I'm working on my application and then periodically I'll go and I'll update all my dependencies. And maybe I'll do that, frequently, or maybe I'll batch it up and do bigger batches. And so we studied this and we found, maybe unsurprisingly, that the tipping point was about one sprint or 3 weeks. Teams that actually looked at all of their dependencies and updated and refreshed all their package dependencies every 3 weeks were spending less total time over the course of a year maintaining third-party package dependencies. And when we thought about it a little more, we realized that's not all that shocking. What's going on, we think, is that if you allow it to batch up, it winds up having nested dependencies and it becomes more ambiguous for the builder, and they may make mistakes and they have to work through resolving dependency and merge conflicts. So that's the insight. So what do we do with that insight? So what we did is we took that metric and we placed it on the dashboard and the metrics that go on the pipelines page that all of our builders are using to build and manage and deploy their applications. And so as you're managing your pipeline and kicking off deployments, you can see information about what you're deploying, and it almost in a way gamifies it so builders know what's important, and they are starting to incentivize across our large builder population to take actions where we want them to go. We also create a version of this and make it available to senior technical leadership so we can kind of compare. And again, our goal is to find pockets where we're great and really hold them up and ask them what their best practices are so we can learn from them, and pockets where we're struggling so we can prioritize investment. So we've talked a lot about how we get what we do here at Amazon. Before we let you go, we wanted to figure, what are our key big takeaways? And if there's one big takeaway, I could say it's look for these win-wins. And we've talked about a few of them. Find places where you can get security right by default. It gets your security right by default, as I just said, and it means your teams are delivering faster for customers. We did that with our tool like SAS, which you can do with Code Artifact. We're doing it with Mechanic, which you can use SSM for. And we're doing it with our metrics, where we put it in the hands of builders at the right moment in time.
Yes, and then if you're going home and you're thinking, how do I start to build up the security practice within my builder teams, you can start to think about the diversity that you need in order to pilot this idea. Again, I can't stress that more. Identify a diverse set of builders, ones that are excited about security, ones that are excited about growth within your organization, and develop one of them on individual builder teams to see the impact. The second thing is don't forget to train, measure, report on, and recognize these guardians for what they do. And I think, Eric, you talking about how you're embedding those metrics into the tools that the builders are using at the right time is really critical. So go home and look to see where are the metrics that you have, and are you surfacing them where they're most actionable and convenient for your builders? So last but certainly not least, identify an initial set of inputs and output metrics to help inform and measure the impact of these investments, because investing in your builders and that builder experience is something that you need to be able to measure and demonstrate the impact on so that you can continue to build out this program in a partnership across your organizations and your security teams. So with that said, I want to thank you all for joining us today, those in person as well as those on the live stream. We really appreciate your time and for coming. And then Eric, I personally want to thank you for doing this presentation with me. Eric has done some incredible things at AWS, and one of the most incredible, I think, is this partnership between our orgs, and I'm really happy that we were able to share it with you. And then last but not least, please do take your survey in your app once you walk out of here. We greatly value your feedback, and we hope you enjoy the rest of Reinforce.
Thanks. Have a great conference.